So I moved to the UK in 2005, so I was 9. I
Wow.
grew up
Okay.
in, yeah, so I've lived here for more than half my life now.
Hmm.
But I still have family in Swaziland, and I go back there quite often, so I still have quite a strong connection there.
That's nice.
Um,
Does it
yeah.
take how long's the flight to get there?
Well, it's about a 10-hour flight to Johannesburg and then about a
Yeah.
5-hour drive to
And then a five
Swaziland.
hour drive.
Yeah,
Okay. It's I mean it's still better than New Zealand. Like
yeah.
it's like 30 hours to get to New Zealand.
Yeah, I think I'm winning still on that front, but still quite
Yeah,
long.
yeah.
There's no time difference really. It's only like an hour, so there's no jet lag.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah.
Yeah,
The advantage of like, yeah, just moving like north to south.
yeah, definitely. Um, yeah, so that's when I moved, and then yeah, been here ever since.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
do you feel very like, do you feel British now, or like, how does it feel for you?
yeah, I'm very English. I mean, I think there are things about me that are Swazi, but they don't really get an opportunity to really to be shown here.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, like I can speak a bit of the language, not fluently, sadly, um, but also like experiences which don't like come up here. When people talk about their childhood here and they talk about
Hmm.
things that they did, I'm just like, no. um, so yeah, I do feel British, but not completely.
Mm. It's
Yeah,
it's a funny one, isn't it? Like, so like I have two siblings and all of us like have different accents because like during those kind of like accent forming years are really like your early teenage years are like quite important for like when your accent and a lot of aspects of identity really form, you know. And
yeah,
even though I don't, yeah, even though like I would never have become an American citizen, and there's a lot of things that I don't like about the place, like the fact that like my accent is like does have a strong root there. um I think is because like that was where I spent my teenage years, and then my little brother, he spent his years here in the UK, so
yeah,
he's like pretty much like can pass as British, like fully.
yeah.
um
So what do
yeah,
you consider yourself? Because obviously you're,
I consider
yeah,
myself British Kiwi, so you know I did become, you know, although I sound like this, I do think of myself as like very as British and really proud to be British. I became a citizen 4 or 5 years ago now.
hmm,
um and yeah, like yeah, I really loved it here pretty much from when we got here. You know, like Kiwis are like super laid back, and like, you know, Americans in the East Coast are like really uptight and like A-type personalities and like go 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 like all the time. And like the UK was just kind of like a nice kind of like in between of like stuff going on, but also like people still being like, hey, you know, spending time with family and friends is nice, you know, like there's more to life than
yeah,
money and a career. um yeah, and just a little bit more like humility as well, and I think just self-awareness that I see in the British that I just really appreciated. It was just like, yeah, like when my family was in the US, like it was great, and I'm really grateful for that time. But like at the same time, it never really felt like home. We always
mm,
kind of felt like just that little thing of like feeling like a stranger. Um, uh, yeah, and then when we came here, it was like, even though I'm like quite different to like my peers, like this definitely feels like home, you know.
yeah. That's good. That's good that you found
Was
that.
there a moment for you that was kind of like that where you're like, oh, okay, I'm settled in now?
um, Moving to England wasn't particularly difficult because my dad's British and I'd been to
Hmm.
visit quite a lot, so it wasn't really a very big culture shock.
Yeah.
Um, so the country felt like home like fairly quickly, but I don't think like an actual physical home. I probably didn't get that until I really feel that until I was about 18. because we moved around like a little bit, still in like the same town. But yeah, I think Devon really started feeling like home when I left it to go to dance school, and I realized how great it was. After going to the big city, which was like, it's really amazing. Like moving to London was so exciting, but I just remember getting the train home and seeing cows and like feeling so happy about it. The green grass, I was like, oh, this feels so good.
It's so true though, isn't it? Like, it's, you know, I think that's the experience of like a lot of teens where they're just like, I want to get out of here, like, and experience life. And then you get out and you're just like, oh, that was a really nice place actually where I grew up. I just didn't like appreciate it because it was where my parents were. Like, so I was just like, let's get out.
Exactly. I mean, there's not really, for like that age group, there's not really that much going on for being a teenager. So I was like at the point where, you know, I was like, I want to go out and I want to do things. I'm independent. Yeah. But so I didn't actually really enjoy London. So after going to dance school, I was just like, after that, I was like, I don't want to live in London again. Yeah. And then I went away, and then all of my friends were in London, so I was constantly visiting. And then I was like, yeah, I love London, and so I've gone full circle, and I'm back there again. Didn't think I would be, but
it's a rocky relationship. That's, you know, we can say.
yeah. It's a love-hate relationship, but yeah, it's good. It's been good to me at the moment.
Is all right. That's great. Let me introduce you properly. I'll introduce you to the audience, and then we can like just jump into a bit more of this stuff. It's great. Hello, lovely dance people, and welcome to David's Dance Podcast. I'm your host, David Evans. We have an amazing dancer here with us on the podcast. I asked her to be on the podcast after seeing this lady dance, and I was just really impressed by like her movement quality, especially the deliberateness of her movement and the sense in which like her movement really leaves a strong mark on the space and sort of and that way creates real sort of meaningfulness with the way that she dances and moves in a way that brings real weight to the dance, which I think is just so fantastic. She's currently working with Richard Chappell Dance, which is an interdisciplinary dance theatre company based in the southwest of England. And she's working on a new project with them, and we're excited to talk about it. And yeah, we're really happy to have her on the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Sharol Mackenzie. Sharol, welcome.
Hello, thank you. That was such a nice intro. Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. Like, yeah, we're so glad to have you on, and it's nice to meet you as well. This is like first time.
I know. Thanks for asking me to be on it. It was a nice surprise. I've never been asked to do a podcast before.
Well, yeah. Hopefully it's good.
Yeah, I'll try and make it interesting.
No, that's good. Like before we introduce you, we're sort of talking about our kind of experiences, like growing up and like moving from one country to the next. Or is there ways in which because you grew up in Eswatini in Swaziland, and there's are there ways in which you feel like kind of life experiences or attitudes there inform your dance now in a way that if you hadn't had those experiences, you wouldn't approach dance necessarily the same way?
I'm very impressed that you said Eswatini, so that's good.
Thanks.
Checking up. To be honest, no, because the majority of so I did start dancing in Swaziland. I started doing ballet lessons there, but it wasn't really anything I took seriously until I moved to England. And so that's when when I started dancing here and was like, oh, actually, I didn't realize that you could dance for a job. That's when I started really getting into it. Although I had a really like physical childhood, being outside, climbing trees. I think that really gave me an awareness of my body from quite like an early age, which I think translated into like moving your body through dancing. So I feel like that was probably the only real connection that I had that I think has really helped me being climbing trees and running around the bush.
And so when was that moment then for you, when I guess you're saying coming to the UK and stuff, and when was that moment when you're like, oh, dance can be a career?
So when I was 12 or 13, I auditioned for a CAT scheme, which is a government program designed to get British dancers into conservatoires. And so I went along and didn't really know what it was, and then I started, and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I guess I'm going to be a dancer then. That's what I want to do. And then from the age of like 13, I was like, that's what I had like my focus on. I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I just didn't think that, especially contemporary dance, you knew like commercial dance, obviously people are get paid to be Beyonce's backing dancers. But I was like, oh, whoa, I can be paid to perform in a theatre with my friends. This is great.
I love that. That's probably like one of the most casual answers like we've heard yet. It's like, looks like I'm gonna be a dancer.
Well, I mean, no, I don't think it was quite so casual. I guess it kind of was. I was just like, yeah, I'm going to be a dancer, and then I decided, and that's what I was like really heavily working for.
Yeah, well, it doesn't. Yeah, I guess it doesn't need to be like an, some transcendent moment, and light fell from heaven, and I knew.
It came to me in a dream.
Exactly. And I woke, and I knew I was meant to dance.
So it was probably from the age of 13. I decided I want to be a dancer, and went for it.
And why contemporary dance in particular?
I mean, there was a brief moment where I thought I wanted to do commercial, but one, I don't think I was particularly good at it, and two, it wasn't the type of industry I wanted to go in. Why contemporary dance? Well, I guess from the CAT scheme was based around contemporary dance,
and CAT, for those not based in the UK, is a Centre for Advanced Training.
Yeah. So mine was a contemporary CAT scheme. And I don't really know. I guess I didn't really think about it. I really loved the vastness of contemporary dance and the variety that it brought. That you can do within the same genre, you wouldn't even know that they are related. And I think I've always really enjoyed variety. Like I've done ballet and jazz, so I think doing lots of different types of dancing interested me. And there was just so much to learn, and I was really excited about it.
It's interesting in a way, like just what we call contemporary dance, because the techniques that kind of make up contemporary dance today are really diverse and like quite like divergent, and it's really interesting how we like put them kind of under this umbrella and we're like all of these like this absolute like mishmash of things like contemporary dance.
Yeah, exactly. I hate the question when people haven't seen any contemporary dance, so they're like, oh, so what do you do? I'm like, oh, I'm a contemporary dancer. And they're like, what is contemporary dance? And I'm like, oh, how do I explain this? I just sort of explain it as like everything that sort of isn't labeled as something else probably falls under contemporary dance. Like it encompasses like, unless it's like, the melting pot of all the thing in between things, or like the mashing together of different styles, I would probably define as contemporary dance.
Defining it as a like a not style. Well, it's not commercial and it's not ballet. Must be contemporary dance.
That's, I mean, maybe that's not right. Maybe people wouldn't agree with me, but that's how I try to describe it to people who don't know what it is.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There's I talked about it a bit last time on the podcast, but like it's when people ask me, I usually, it's maybe a bit more, well, so I usually describe, most people are really familiar with ballet in the UK, just because it's so ubiquitous and has such like a long history here. So usually I would just say like ballet is about being on balance, and contemporary is a similar form, but it's about being off balance. And ballet is kind of about like sort of defying gravity, and like contemporary is more about like embracing gravity. So it's kind of it's like similar aesthetic, but like the way that they handle physics fundamentally is like really different. And the kind of like aesthetic and like approach to the mechanics are like quite different. I think that's where I guess the split happens in history, and like something becomes kind of more contemporary than ballet in a way.
Yeah, that's quite a good explanation. I haven't thought of it that way before.
But it is also not commercial, like not ballet and all of these things. Usually, if you see someone like moving in a weird way, you're like, probably contemporary dance.
Yeah, and like I have so many friends, they all come from different like backgrounds, and they mix that with like, I guess, the traditional techniques that they have learned.
Yeah.
And it becomes like something like new and beautiful. So
it is one of the great things about contemporary is the way in which, I'm not really sure why it is, but it takes on other ingredients really well. Like contemporary is kind of like a really great like soup broth, and that you kind of put like anything else, add anything else to it, and it'll probably be pretty good. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can always like, take contemporary and like sprinkle in a bit of breaking, or like sprinkle in a bit of West African dance, and like it'll probably come out pretty good.
Yeah. It's the good base layer for adding loads of other stuff to it.
It is, and I'm not like, I'm not really 100% like sure why that is. But like I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of it is a little bit like I was saying, in that like contemporary dance is more about kind of like an approach to the body as well, that and kind of like a framework for working with the body, and kind of in kind of this way it can be like a really interesting way to approach and absorb and like work with traditional dance forms, which and kind of maybe dissect them. That sounds a little bit clinical, but kind of work with them in like a certain way, like I think of my friend Shivangi, who works with the Southern Indian classical style Paranatiam, and like works with it in like a contemporary context. And for her, like that is kind of like how she can start to like kind of investigate that style, and feel like she actually understands it in a way that is kind of deeper than if she was just studying it, doing the Paranatiam training. So I think there's maybe like learnings there. There's a way of like approaching and learning about different dance forms kind of through the maybe contemporary dance kind of mindset.
Well, yeah, because it comes out of breaking away from traditional ballet roles. I mean, if you go back to thinking about it from America, Merce Cunningham and Martha Graham. And so if you think about it, like deconstructing something that already exists, you can apply that to almost any dance form. And whether you use that to break away from it or to understand it more, it helps and is going to create something new. So I think the lens in which or the thought process that goes behind making a lot of contemporary dance applied to lots of other dance styles helps.
And I think other styles have those things, like a lot of but I just think contemporary dance often does a really good job of articulating them. Like I see a lot of similar concepts in beauty that I've seen expressed through like hip hop and breaking, like where there's similar ideas there, but it's sort of like a total like mishmash of how those ideas are expressed. Whereas I think the helpful thing about contemporary is that they really tried to hone in on like a specific language, and like talking about like, hey, how do we articulate these ideas? And once they articulated those movement ideas, they were then like able to apply them to other things in a way that, I've heard like, hip hop dances like very beautifully, but like describe a similar movement concept in like 10 different ways. you know, and all from like these different dances, you know, which is amazing because they've all come up with their own language to describe like a certain idea in the movement. But it also makes it difficult to give it more broader like applicability, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
Yeah.
I really love like in like watching you dance. You have really good presence, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
And I think there's a real, yeah, there's a really good presence and a real good sense of like placing your movement. Like is there a sense in which like you feel like the act of dancing is like quite meaningful to you, or like what is it like when you're dancing? What are you thinking about, or what are you trying to embody, I guess? Like what are the ways in which you approach like the kind of the act of dancing, the kind of like performance of it, you know? What's kind of going through your head, if it like anything is, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends what you're doing, but if the thing that I love about dancing is really about how it feels. And so if I'm dancing for myself or something, I want it to feel good in my body. Um, and also like the different quality, I really try to focus on the quality of the movement of what I'm doing and try to really get that. Because when I've watched other people dance, when I feel like when they've had a really beautiful quality, no matter what they're doing, I really enjoyed. And also like, I think a little bit came from like, because I went to a dance school, which does a lot of classical dance. And that wasn't exactly my strong suit. But then I really focused on doing it, dancing with a beautiful quality, or trying to make up for the fact that my legs weren't like up by my ears. So I think that's how it sort of some of it started that way. But yeah, mostly is about how it feels in my body and what I can do to make it fluid and flow from one movement to the next in a way that feels nice, and then hopefully it looks nice too.
So it's kind of like about like like connecting the ideas as well, because I think that's definitely there. You know, sometimes you can watch certain dance and pardon me, and it can feel like a little bit like disjointed, like the ideas haven't connected. But there's a real sense of like putting sentences together and putting phrases together, like in your dancing, that's like quite articulate and quite clear, I think. And when you say like, you know, I'm really digging into this, but like when you talk about like how it feels in your body, like what do you mean by that? Do you mean like how it like physically, like literally feels, or do you mean like how it feels kind of like as a mode of like expression, or like how it feels emotionally, like sort of what is that?
How it feels, like how it feels physically in my body. If I'm improvising, I'm dancing, I want it to feel nice. I think generally I'm quite like a soft and fluid mover. I find it quite difficult to have a lot of attack and tension. So yeah, so anything that
Yeah,
I do
you
really
heard us
good.
Cunningham style.
Actually, no, I actually quite enjoyed Cunningham, so
Yeah.
I don't mind it. But I think there's even within that, there's like a fluidity. I think the change of like finding, I wouldn't even say tension, but to find like a dynamic and the fluidity afterwards. I think you can find fluidity in most things that you do. It's all about like the in between movements rather than the end.
Yeah.
That make the end look good, but the whole journey between those 2 points. And if you make those feel good and you make them feel smooth in your body, then I think that reads when people watch you. And so
it's also,
I think,
yeah, go ahead.
no, I was like, yeah, so no matter like what I'm doing, even if it does have a lot of attack in it, to find the in-between moments and the smooth bits and the different qualities and how you can get from those different one quality to the next smoothly in a way that feels good for you, I think helps.
No, yeah, I totally agree. It's and it's this thing like I feel like when I watch dances, you know, these dancers and you're like, oh, you can't take your eyes off of them, and their movement is like really like mesmerizing. I think a lot of it really is just like like you say, they're able to connect one idea to the next. So you're never and because it's not so disjointed, or I mean, it can be physically disjointed if as long as that's like the intention and the aesthetic, but it's more about, like you say, like how those ideas connect together, so it doesn't sort of like jar you out of it. Because I think there's a very real way in which so like when we watch someone else, our brain is like mirroring what we're doing. Like those neurons are like firing, but then there's like an inhibitor that stops us from doing the movement. But our brain maps like their movement onto our body. So when you see a movement that looks kind of disjointed in someone else's body, you experience it like it was disjointed in your own, like, oh, that was a bit awkward. Like, whereas when you see like movement that's like really juicy and like really has a real clarity of like how he got from one thing to the next, there's a sense, and all of this kind of happening at the subconscious level, but like a sense in which you can watch something and feel like, oh wow, like that's how we got there. And because it feels like connected, you stay with them, you stay with that performer, and the way that they're staying with the performance, like you're also able to stay with them and like watching the performance. And like, ooh, that was weird, ooh, and like keep like, and in a way that those kind of things can jar you out of your body, they can also like physically jar you out of like the experience of watching, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Your kinesthetic empathy definitely kicks in. Yeah. And it's so nice just watching
kinesthetic empathy. Yeah, that's what we're looking for.
And when you I think when you watch dancers and they're really invested in what they're doing and they're curious in their movement, it's just such a joy to watch. So I try to do that.
How do you think, like, so you went to so after your CAT scheme, where did you go?
I went to Brombear School of Ballet and Contemporary Dance.
And during your time like at Rambert, like how did you find like what was kind of you? Because Rambert is like a really quite specific style. It's very classically trained, as you say. Sort of how did you kind of through that like sort of find what you were kind of interested in dance wise?
So I went to the school because I wanted to get a strong base in like technique, which I thought I was that I was lacking, and I definitely got that. And there's also, even though it is a very classically trained school and you do quite traditional dance styles, there are they do get a lot of guest teachers in, which are from different things. And also when I did also do lots of workshops and things outside of that, how did I find what I was interested in? To be honest, I think I'm still figuring that out. I went on to Verve afterwards as well and worked with different choreographers. And I think, what I really like moving. So, I mean, that encompasses a lot, but I think I realized that I actually really enjoy the physicality of dance rather than necessarily things which are particularly very conceptual. That's great, and I can dive into that, but it's how the dancing feels to me, no matter what the choreographic style is. If it feels nice for me to dance and I'm surrounded by good people, that's what I would like to do. But
so it's not so much like the performative aspect of it as much as it is just like the physical experience of dancing, which is quite like quite personal and like quite internal way, like to kind of approach your dancing.
Yeah, I think it used to be that I used to really love performing, and I still do like performing, but I think as I'm getting older, it's more about how it feels and the people that I'm surrounded by.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually at the moment trying to figure out how much dancing is going to be in my life at the moment, so I don't really
Yeah.
know. I'm not sure in what capacity I would really like to dance, whether it's just something that I want to do for myself, or whether I still want to carry on performing. I'm not sure. I think this year has given me a break away from it, and I realized that I really love dancing, but I don't necessarily need it to be happy. Whereas before, I thought I was like, if I didn't dance, like it would be, I don't know what I'd do with myself. I mean, I don't know what I'd do with myself if I didn't dance, but I know that I'd be okay. So yeah, so I feel like I'm in a bit of a strange spot. But going there, I worked with like so many beautiful dancers. I think the thing at Romba, they gave us, like, a lot of the dancers, a lot of creative freedom. We had a lot of opportunities to perform, which was really, really great. So I got to work with all of my friends, and actually since leaving school, most of my jobs have been with people who I've worked with before during my time at school, and new people too. But yeah, I think the thing that made me fall in love with dancing was the people that it connects you to, just as well as how it feels in doing it, but the people that you dance with. And I'm just always so like in awe of all the people I know who do such amazing things and like try to grab things from them. That really went off piece from your question. Basically, I don't really know. I don't think I know the answer to that question. I'm still figuring it out.
That's all right. But I think there's, like, it's all valuable, isn't it? Like, it's figuring out what's important to you, and what kind of the kind of base ingredients are of, like, what makes you happy, or what work you find like fulfilling. I tend to be a bit more interested in this idea of like fulfilling work than like just work that makes us happy. I feel like the word happy is maybe a little bit too like hedonistic, and sometimes we get caught up in like,
but if you're fulfilled, then you're happy, right? So I think
in like a kind of deeper way, but like, I don't know. I think sometimes we get a little bit hung up in the West on like this kind of like more like hedonistic idea of happiness, where it's like, well, this is going to be like fun and like super enjoyable and like all the time, rather than getting into things of like, I guess like certain aspects of like contentedness beyond dance and stuff, like, or and talking about like these variations of dance, other areas in which you would like to work, maybe outside of what you're currently doing in dance.
In dance, well,
or beyond.
I've been thinking for a while that I'd really like to teach dancing or improvisation to people who don't dance. I've been getting a lot more into yoga recently, and I've been doing some other courses which are like for myself, and I realize like how disconnected people are from their bodies, and it's not and that we don't know the thing that we're attached to, and the signs that it tells us, and I think that dancing has taught me like so much about my own body, that I know that like, oh, this bit feels a bit like weird, it might be because of this, or like just the physical feeling of like feeling your body. I think that lots of people are disconnected to, so that's something that I might want to transition into.
It's easy, like, and it's, and in many ways it's not people's fault, because we sort of, a lot of us work quite stagnant, desk jobs. Like, it's even worse now, like, like a lot of people working from home as well, to, so you're not even like walking to an office or walking to work necessarily, to end up being stagnant, and then to sort of see your body as like something that carries your head from one place to another.
Exactly. But like, there's the disconnection.
But I think, like you say, and it is particular to like contemporary dance as well, but like this act of like listening to the body which, you know, was really important for me. Like my only bit of formal training was I did like a year at Laban. They had like a 1-year program for people transitioning from other careers or other sort of academics or whatever. But like, you know, I come mostly from like a background in breakdance and salsa. So,
what a
you know,
combination.
I know, and like b-boys like don't listen to their body at all. They're I've seen like break dancers with like broken ankles, like still like doing freezes and stuff, or like just like, oh yeah, my neck kind of hurts, and you know, and then still trying to do like head spins, and then like the next day they're just like, I can't dance for like a month, like I'm in a neck brace. It's like, yeah, maybe when like you felt the tinge, you sort of should have like taken it a bit easier. You know, and going from that to like at Laban, when like it was suddenly like, oh, I'm gonna like listen to my body in the morning, and like actually everything, like if it doesn't like, you know, like acknowledging like how my body feels, and then not just accepting that, but then being able to work through that and work with that feeling, and just like with an awareness of it, just like made me my dancing so much more better, because I was so much more present in all parts of my body, but also like just made me so much more injury free, and feeling like I could also work with injuries a lot better, and through a lot of the imbalances that I had when I arrived at Laban, you know, because it's like, oh, that's sore, so it's like, okay, how do I move in a way that's gonna like be kind to that and be able to still keep on working, but just accepting my body for what it currently is, rather than just going, oh, I wish, you know, I didn't have all these imbalances that I'm dealing with. But
yeah, because like you're always going to have imbalances, like regardless, they're never not going to be there. And also like knowing when to push and knowing when to step back. And I think that that's something that you can take, like the connection between your mind and your body is also the connection between like your emotions and your physical body are so connected, but we're taught really like not really to listen to them so much. And that they don't really affect each other, whereas how you feel is going to affect your body and manifest itself in different ways. So not just listening to your physical body, but for both of them to try listen together.
Like we know from like brain scans and stuff that like it's when people are experiencing like emotional pain, like in the brain, it looks pretty much identical to physical pain. You know, it's lighting up a lot of the same areas, you know, and we talk about like, oh, that experience, you know, it was like, we use physical things to describe it. Oh, I was heartbroken. It was gut wrenching, you know, because when we have those emotions, it is like an actual physical experience that we have in our body, you know, and we've somehow made it sort of more abstract than it sort of is, in that we do experience these things almost as if they were physical pain, and vice versa, you know, like when there's loads of tension in the body, like you do feel like emotionally tense. And like when I've done you know, a bit like you're sort of saying, when I've done like workshops or stuff with people who don't come from a dance background or like non-dancers, and just doing like simple like kind of muscle relaxation exercises for like the shoulder and neck, people just feel like afterwards they're just like, oh, I could just like go to bed now. Like I'm just like so relaxed, and like all that tension's gone. And it's like, yeah, you realize, because it's like, if your shoulders feel like this all day, then and it's like, no wonder you like feel stressed. And it might not actually be because anything's like wrong in your life. It might just like, because we just need to get that tension out of your shoulders, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So that's something that I'm becoming more interested in recently. So maybe something to do with that. Other than that, I don't really know. Not sure.
Go for it, dude. I think that would be really great. And I think it's really rewarding. So like my main experience of like working with like very much like non-dancers was like I did a dance series for my parents' home church, on like the idea of kind of like dancers worship. And so, and kind of like as a part of that, it was people really, you know, most of the people in the room did not have like an experience of, much experience of dance, but it was really beautiful to watch that discovery of people discovering the ways in which their bodies could express an idea that they didn't know they couldn't quite express in that way, you know, and sort of building things up, you know, like I think it's really important in teaching to like slowly kind of build people's trust. Like I always like to keep the class kind of going with sort of like no really strong breaks, because if you just jump straight into like the kind of crazy idea, people get really embarrassed. But if you kind of get everyone sort of, you know, going on the journey and just kind of shift from one idea to the next, that sort of thing, which at the beginning people would have been really embarrassed to do, they kind of just end up there sort of, and we're all doing it at the same time. And so because you're all doing it, then no one's embarrassed, you know? So it's sort of like by building up almost like the class culture and sort of like building into it. By the time you're doing that thing that would have been really scary to ask people to do, they're already doing it like unthinkingly, because they're already doing it by the time and that they're thinking about it. So they don't have to be like checking with their brain being like, oh, am I embarrassed about this? You know, like if I work with teenagers, I'm like, I do really try to like stop people from talking and keep people busy, because when people talk or like stop and look at each other, they communicate their embarrassment. And what I actually found is if people can't communicate their embarrassment, they're not embarrassed. And you know, if they don't have that moment where they can like look at their friend and be like, oh, this is crazy, right? Like then they'll keep on going, and suddenly they'll just, when they look around, they're like, oh, everybody's doing this, you know? And they're just they're in it.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Do you think that people can't if they can't communicate their embarrassment, they're not embarrassed?
Yeah, because I think, and sort of in a way, right? Because I think it's more, a lot of when people are doing something new, they want to check that they're like, oh, socially, is this okay? But if you know, and it's looking at their friend, and it's if their friend looks at them, you know, people have that anxiety moment of they're like, is this weird? Like, do I look dumb doing this? Like, should I be laughing nervously about this? Like, and if they look at their friend, if their friend doesn't look back at them and their friend is also like just moving, then they just go, oh, they're moving, I guess it's fine. But if their friend then communicates and goes, oh, I'm not sure about this, then that's the moment in which they suddenly shift the culture in their head, and they suddenly frame what's going on as going, oh, maybe socially, like, oh, is this like socially not okay what I'm doing? Should I be embarrassed? And they start to like question what's happening.
Yeah, you look for that external validation to validate how you should or shouldn't feel, rather than just embracing the experience.
I wanted to ask you a bit about Richard Chappell, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Tell us a little bit. So you did this project with him, which was, what was the last film that you just did?
Present With Me.
Present With Me. And that's like, that was my first kind of introduction. We're actually going to have Richard on the podcast in about a month or so. Next month.
Great.
Yeah, which is awesome. So we're really excited to have him on, and like I'll let him explain a little bit more of like his process and stuff. But you're working on a new project with him as well. Tell us a little bit about that.
So the next project is called Infinite Ways Home, and it's about redefining home and what that means for individuals and community. And Richard is sort of taken inspiration or touching on Celtic tradition and rave culture as well, to that sort of like community feel. Like the score is some electronic music made by these musicians in Wales. And this is the first piece of music that they've created for dance. So yeah, and so we're sort of exploring how we can do that, and our also and bit of also of our perception of reality type thing. Yeah. So there's
So
quite a
how,
lot in there.
yeah, what's the output going to be?
What do you mean by output?
So is it going to be out as like a touring performance? Is it going to be a film? Is it going to be what's
Oh yeah, it's gonna be a show that's gonna be premiered in September, and I assume that Richard hopes that it's gonna go on tour sometime in the following year.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so it's going to be a theatre show. There's gonna also going to be a live violinist on stage as well, on top of the electronic score as well.
Yeah, a lot better than having a dead violinist on stage, I tend to find. So always good to
Yeah,
always good to have the live violinist. That'll be awesome
y-
though. That sounds like such like an interesting mix.
yeah. I mean, I guess he'll tell you about how he got to that point
Hmm.
of creating it and why he's chosen to draw from Celtic tradition.
And
Um,
how many weeks have you been? Because you're doing, are you doing the R&D for that now?
yes, we are. So it's only been 1 week, so it's
Hmm.
very, very early days.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, so far we've just been. I mean, there have been little bits that we've done like previously that are feeding into this. Um, but yeah, so we're just exploring about what that means or how we can create a world on stage of different states in
Mm.
different sections and coming together.
Mm. And it's good like as well getting like a dancer's perspective like for you like from the dancing side and having done you know a couple of Richard's work now how what has it been like being part of the process, you know, what is a sort of Richard Chappell dance process a bit like, you know, how does that compare with maybe other things that you've danced in?
Um, so I think that Richard has quite like all of his dancers are quite varied in what they've come from and their experiences, which is really nice. And he
Mm.
really values and takes bits from each individual, but then also mixes that in with his own individual style. Like he does draw from sort of capoeira and floor work, but he does also have he adds the elements of all the individual dancers, so you feel like you have you have sort of like ownership and also that you're valued
Mm.
as an individual performer, not just as a body in space. This so far this creation is very different from the last one, because from the last one we did was Still Touch, which we were working with three life-sized sculptures, yeah, um, which was something completely new for me. I'd never worked with sculptures before, and they're actually quite difficult to work with. They're not very good dance partners, I must say. I mean, it was really like
A little bit on the unresponsive side.
yeah, a little bit. It was a really great experience to experience that. And but because you're dancing with, well, we were dancing with people, but also inanimate objects. Um, it wasn't quite as physical as I think this work is going to be.
Mm.
Um, because obviously we were dancing directly with just other people, and also the subject matter of Still Touch was a lot more sensitive, and actually like just before it felt very like
Yeah.
appropriate for the time that we were going into, that we didn't know at the time, but about touch and communicating with people and how important it is. And then boop, pandemic, that's where it comes in.
And what like a weighty subject that would become and like how personal that subject has become because it has been so difficult like since you know, yeah, since lockdown and like all the various lockdowns that we've had and you know, and we already kind of, you know, people talk about even just culturally just there being a bit of like a crisis of touch and
Yeah,
you know, and
definitely.
in terms of like these attitudes and yeah, and I think I do think it's kind of Yeah, I do agree. Like, you know, it's especially in sort of certain teaching contexts and things like that. Like, yes, we 100% like need to protect people and protect the vulnerable and stuff, but also I think you need a little bit of like human breathing room, you know, in there. Like, you know, I think about like when I was dancing and teaching like kids and stuff, and like, you know, like I would like, you know, never like instigate physical touch with the kids, like in, like any way. But you know, the kids, like they're kids, like they just run up to you and they're like, hi, and just like hug your leg, and you're not gonna be like, oh, get off me, you know. And I think to some degree there's like an element of like, if we just teach kids to like, if we just put like a ban on touch, then it's just like you just teach kids that touch is bad. And actually it's more about having the discernment between like good touch and bad touch. And
Yeah,
actually that sort of discernment is like, is actually really important, and not actually just putting a blanket thing around just like this thing which is so viscerally human and goes to the depths of like who we are, of like I need to like be in touch with our like fellow man and fellow people, like to just like put a blanket thing and be like all of this is dangerous, and then it's like you know.
yeah, and I think if people don't experience, I think it's about teaching people consent and also making people feel safe enough that they have the
Mm,
agency to decide to tell people when something isn't right, and to just to
yeah,
discern what is good and what's bad. And to I think if we try to teach people of their own boundaries, and also to tell, like, for people to accept other people's boundaries as well, is a really
yeah,
important thing, rather than getting rid of touch. Because I mean, like, touch is the only sense that if you're deprived it from a young age, your brain doesn't develop properly.
yeah,
So it's like it's so important. So I don't think that stopping it is really gonna solve the issue. It's just
yeah,
the language and the way that we approach it, I think, needs to change. So yeah, so I
yeah,
think that it's a really important thing. And that process was, quite like an emotional thing, because obviously touch means very different things to different people. So as a dancer, it was quite like emotional in at some points. Um, and then, and I think for some audience members it was. I mean, I only can judge it from some members of my family who have watched it, of things that they've reminded them, because of the thing of kinesthetic empathy. And we're dancing with inanimate objects which aren't giving anything in return. Um, so so it was, I feel like it was really appropriate. And then about touch, and then now we went into a situation where we're lacking it, or people are,
mm.
that
And it is
communication.
that thing, because whenever you talk about touch, you're talking about like a relationship of some kind, you know, of like, or with someone, you know, and both like those positive experiences and those maybe traumatic or negative experiences as well. So it is really like loaded like emotionally, kind of as you say, with like a lot of meaning. But I definitely think the way forward is to like kind of engage with these things, and you know, and teach consent and stuff like you talk about, and all of that. Like I think one of the things, I was doing a contact improv class, and the teacher for that said something that I thought was really great, which was, especially as like someone who's generally kind of on the agreeable side, is like, he's like, you're never doing anyone a favor by dancing with them if you don't want to dance with them. And I was
Mm.
like, oh wow, okay. Because there's, you know, and coming from Salsa as well, you know, there's moments when you're like, yeah, okay. Like, you know, when you maybe don't want to dance with someone, and you do, or you're just like, you're trying to be nice, you know. And it was actually really confirming, because he was like, actually, he's like, if you want to know that when you're dancing with people, they really are there and they really want to dance with you, you know, and that it's not like burdensome in some kind of way for them. They're not like, oh, like I don't want to leave because it's socially awkward, you know. And yeah, I found that really good. And similarly through salsa, like, you know, of course there's like a lot of just freaking weirdos in salsa, and just like people in usually guys, but you know, I've had it from women as well, where like the hand slip and it's not in the right place, and you're gonna have to have a word with people and just be like, in this dance style, like your hand doesn't go there. Like this is the form, you know, and you don't stray from it, you know, and yeah, but but like encouraging it and leaning into communication and the ability to say no, and you know, and that, like in those contexts, like I can go up to people and say like, hey, would you like to have a dance, and then just say like, no thanks, and I'll be like, great, cool, and like and that there's no issue, you know.
I think that it's hard though, because I think that from lots of people's life experiences, though, that they don't have the ability to say no so easily. So it's not just on the people to say like, no, this is not like all right, but also just for anyone that you come into contact with, to make sure that they're comfortable with whatever.
Of course.
Like a constant like conversation about like communication, just checking in with like the person you're dancing with or whatever, and making sure that they feel comfortable as well. But I agree I don't think stopping it is the answer. I don't think that's going to solve the issue at all. But so this process is a lot more physical. And maybe I'm just saying that because it's been like a long time since we've been able to be in a studio and dance like for
it just feels more physical,
and so it's really early days, so it's quite hard to tell where it's sort of like going to go. But I think that there's going to be a real sense of group with us, with the dancers on stage, and we'll have our moments of our individual journeys, but I think that's what the direction it's heading is. How we feel as a group and convey what Richard wants us to convey on stage.
Hopefully, fingers crossed. Where can people follow you or follow this work? Where can people find out about it?
So you can follow on my Instagram. Well, it's my personal Instagram, Richard Chappell Dance. I think that's his Instagram. And also his website, Richard Chappell Dance. If you Google that, if you want to go watch it, it's being sold at the Exeter Northcote website. And also there's a link to that in Richard Chappell's website as well. So if you go to Richard Chappell's website, I'm sure you'll find everything.
We'll drop all those links in the description below. And wanted to just say thank you, Sharol, for being on the podcast, and thank you, listeners. We look forward to seeing you next week. And if you enjoyed what you heard today, then hit that like and subscribe. And thanks very much for being on the podcast and joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.